There we go. All right. Let's mute that one. All righty.
Helps to record and arm things whenever you're trying to record instead of just hitting play. There we go. Hi, world. Could you hear me? I just couldn't hear anything else.
I hear you.
Okay.
I don't know.
Got it. Yes. Works. It works. Sometimes technology scares me. Hi, Carol.
Oh, I should get the chat up.
I pull up, I don't know if this is necessary or not, but I've been pulling up the chat for Circle as well. I don't know that anybody's been there to date, but I pull it up nonetheless.
Oh, hey, look at that. You can do pop-out chat.
Oh, you just learned that.
That's way better.
I have used that for a very, very long time.
Well, except now it's frozen, so.
Yeah, I use that a lot.
Cool.
It makes my life way, 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 way better.
I need to figure out my next book. You got to give me a couple minutes.
There were a couple in this one, like towards the end, that I kind of thought you might pick from.
Ooh, what were they? Give me a reminder.
Let me get there. He started like naming off a whole bunch of people, but there was one that he was pulling from a lot of right at the end. Was it Tuesdays? Tuesdays with Maury?
Oh, the TV show.
Yep. It turned into a book.
Okay.
And then I think the book became a TV show.
Yeah.
I think is the order of operations. I kind of thought you might pick that one. But what were the others? There was like a whole bunch of them that he was rattling off like in the last chapter or two.
You mentioned Sean McCabe in this book.
Mm-hmm. And people that I don't normally see in books. Like,
yeah.
Like you'll see Tiago Forte in some books, but not very often. But to have him and then was it Jocelyn K. Gly and Maria Popova?
Well, yeah, Maria Popova. Does she have a book?
Yes, I have it. If you're going to pick that one, we need to like.
Oh, the figuring one?
That thing is a monster. What is it, 600 pages? No, that's too long. That would be too much for it.
There's nothing in the circle recommendations yet, so I mean, I have a bunch of books that I just bought, so I could pick one of those, but
what have I got here? Gratitude and Pasta.
You
could do the Redeeming Productivity book. Things you can only see when you slow down.
Let's see.
The Rhythms of Life.
There's 24/6.
Get out of your own way. Chatter. There's Mental Models Volume 3.
That's true. Oh, I know which one I want to pick. Well, no, I don't.
I know. Super complicated.
It is. I don't have a list to go look at anymore.
I keep a personal one.
Carol, what book should I pick for next time?
Ooh, just let Carol pick it.
Well, potentially.
He's holding on to veto power.
Absolutely.
There. We don't want to let you pick it, huh?
Well, that is to be determined.
That would be.
We d-
I feel like okay. This is a scenario where sometimes I feel like people underestimate their ability to do something, and then when they do the thing, it's like, holy buckets, that was amazing. This is probably one of those scenarios, Carol. Like,
That's what I'm thinking.
you're underestimating yourself, and when you pick it, like, oh, that's exactly the right book. As she picks Sapiens.
The
Gap
Gap in the
in
Gain.
the
We haven't. That's a great suggestion.
Ding.
Seriously, that's a good one. Can't believe. Well, I can believe. It's been a week, let me tell you.
Who's
But
that one by?
that's Dan Sullivan. But I bring that up all the time. I think I even brought it up last episode, that whole concept. So it'd be great to have like a deeper discussion on what that actually
High
is.
Achiever's Guide to Happiness, Confidence, and Success. Did you find your book? Is that it? Is it? Is it? Is it? Is it?
I think so. That's by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Benjamin Hardy.
Oh yes. Can't forget the doctor.
Sometimes
All right.
those folks are all up in that.
I think you'll like that one.
You get your thing starting this Friday, right?
I do. Something else I gotta work on yet.
Details.
But it's gonna be good. Rachel and I did a live call not last Friday, I guess, but Friday before.
Okay.
And just overall life theme. Um, 1 hour long call, and it went really well. And so we're gonna basically be breaking it down even further, do an hour on each of the steps, but it's gonna be good. You're gonna be joining?
This Friday, yep.
Excellent.
That is my plan. Sorry, busy ordering books. Like the
Admiral McRaven.
most
What's the new
important thing I could
Admiral
do.
McRaven? He's the guy who did like Make Your Bed. Yeah, okay. Uh, the Wisdom of the Bullfrog? Is that the one?
Wisdom of the
Hero
Bullfrog.
Code. Got that one.
Hi, Blake.
Can't stay. Gotta fly soon. Fine. Fine.
Always makes me chuckle when you say that.
All
It's total dad joke.
right. We should probably get started then. I got my books, so I think we're good.
Hold on. I'm ordering things. This is like important.
Okay.
I gotta place my order now. Okay?
Okie dokie.
Chill out. Okay, now we can start. Just needed those 2 seconds. You're gonna fly over my head, Chicago to DC. You're not going over my head then. I'll
Goes
be.
to over my.
I am under you.
I flew out of Milwaukee yesterday, or flew into Milwaukee. No, Saturday, 2 days ago. I was in the mountains.
Was it fun?
It was fun. I was in California, but in an area of California that last month got 14 feet of snow.
Then keep it. I'm okay without it.
I'm not sure which mountains. It was Lake Arrowhead area. I'm training for a half marathon in a couple weeks, and did a couple runs while I was there.
Yeah.
And the like most of the time I run around here, like the Thursday before I left, I did 13.1 miles, and you look at the stats in the Apple Watch afterwards, and it gives you like the elevation change, and
Hmm.
it's like 13 feet total, right? Pretty flat. But I did 2.5 on the last day, and it's a mile up, so thinner air kicked my butt. But the elevation change was 360 feet.
Yep.
It was interesting.
I'll
All right,
tell.
we better record a podcast here.
Yes, I'm good when you are.
All right, I just don't have a clever way to start this episode.
Okay. Well, you better think of
Any
one then.
suggestions?
Um,
My brain is not working. This could be a real interesting episode today.
I thought of that, yeah, because we were like prepping. It's like, huh, this will be fun. I wonder how far off the rails I can get Mike today.
Oh, if there was ever a day, it's today.
Let's see. I usually look around me, and something usually trips. I mean, I have all sorts of things that I could start if I was doing it, but
Well, what do you got? Let's promote something you're doing.
promote something I'm doing. That's all like day jobby stuff.
Mm, okay.
I've been writing. My wife's going to start holding me accountable to publishing blog posts in the next month.
Hey,
So,
I like it. I like it.
so she's going to start that, but it's probably not going to release. The first one won't release for at least probably 3 weeks.
Okay.
So we'll record again before that's a thing.
So don't talk about that yet, you're saying.
Um, it's always keyboards. It's always pens. Name tags.
I did get a new keyboard.
Okay, we can go
It was
there.
gi- it was given to me actually.
Is it a worthwhile keyboard, or is it just like a junker?
Keychron Q1.
So it's a junker. Okay. All right. Good to know.
Could talk about Disneyland.
Sure. We can talk about Disneyland.
Disneyland with Max Sparky.
That would be a trip.
It was. It's great. Got to fly the Millennium Falcon. Kinda.
Sparks is giving away his stuff.
Yeah, let's just roll.
Okay. Keyboards. Whatever you want to do.
I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. All right. You don't have to press any buttons, right? Because you're already going.
I drop a marker.
Okay. Ready?
Yep.
3, 2, 1. Well, I made it back from the mountains in California, Joe, and am excited to talk to you about the pathless path today.
Yeah. Did you find any paths in the mountains while you were there?
Oh, there are paths everywhere in the mountains. It's kind of interesting. In the Midwest, we're kind of spoiled, I guess, with how much room we have. Because up in the mountains, like the view is beautiful, but the houses are pretty much on top of one another.
Yep.
And the roads are like a lane and a half wide, but they're 2 lanes of traffic. And you frequently feel like you're about to go over a hill down an embankment.
I know
But it's a
my wife and I rented a cabin in the mountains in Tennessee. This has been a while back now, and I just remember thinking it's like, okay, this is really cool. We get a cabin up in the mountains, but there's like nowhere to sit outside. Like you're in the cabin, and if you go out on the deck, that lets you oversee the big view. But if you look down, it's like 100 feet off the deck, just because it's all rock. It's like, well, at least the house won't go anywhere. But I'm used to big yards and acreages and stuff. I was like, it's just not worth that out there. But
Yeah, little claustrophobic, but it was a beautiful area. Mentioned before we hit record, I trained for a half marathon, so did a couple of runs up in the mountain air, which completely kicked my butt. I'm not used to the altitude, not used to the hills, and like ran 13.1 on the Thursday before I went there, ran 2.5 while I was there, considerably slower. And like the elevation gain on my Apple Watch when I run around here is like 13 feet difference if I take the hilly route.
yeah,
Right. Well, there in my 2.5 mile run, it was 360 feet. So it
a
was
little bit of a difference there. Yeah.
yeah, a little different, but absolutely beautiful. Got to go to Disneyland. That was awesome. Um
Okay.
so
Remind me, Disneyland versus Disney World. I'm bad and get these
Disney,
backwards.
yeah, Disneyland's the original. That's
That's what it is.
in Anaheim, Irvine, and that's the one that Walt went all in and bought the land and built the park, and then Disney World came later. But Disneyland, there's a lot less room, so it's kind of interesting. Like we were walking around the Star Wars area, and Star Wars like Galaxy, huge, right?
Yep.
And there's not a ton of room there, so they have a lot of interesting things they've done with the sizes and shapes of the models to make it feel like things are further away than they really are.
Sure.
It's actually kinda trippy when you see it because 'cause you'll come at something from one side and you'll see that, like, this big fake mountain range thing is, like, right behind this thing, and then when you get up to it and you look up at it, it feels like it's thousands of feet away, you know? It's weird. But, yeah, Star Wars Land is pretty cool. And went with David, and it was pretty cool because he knows I'm a Star Wars nerd, but not on the level that he is. But he's just pointing out all these little details that I would have missed if I was there. Like we were in the cantina, and there's the booth by the door, and
Okay.
we're walking out, and there's two blaster holes in the wall right by the door, right from Episode 4 when Han and I forget the alien's name. You know, they have the shootout,
Yep.
and he just makes comments like, "Huh, somebody's blaster must have gone off right there." you know. So they really did a great job with the area, and then being with David and his family, they knew exactly where to go and
Yeah.
just had to follow them around and do the things. Didn't have to make a single decision, I think, the entire time we were there.
I
But
think stuff like that is underrated. Like people don't realize like if you have somebody who is in the know that knows the stuff inside and out, like go with them and just tell them, "Give me a good time and I don't want to
yep.
make any decisions. Like just go for it." And it's always way better that way because they know like the best of the best. It's like that right there. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, well, I am going to put a link in the show notes here for people who are interested. I highly recommend Disneyland. I've been to Disney World too. Disneyland is better, can confirm. And I know David and his wife have put together like the Disneyland field guide videos that they've done,
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
which is pretty cool. So even if you don't have somebody to show you around, there's at least those resources, and
Yeah.
I'll say those for people who are interested. But yeah, it was a good time.
David would be the one I'd want to go with for sure.
All right, should we talk about follow up? You've got two action items here.
I do. And I mean I did both of them. I I have better results on one versus the other. See if you can make a quick guess as to which one's which. Uh, the second of the two, but the first is make sure my posture is okay. So like this is like the whole stand up straight scenario, and I have my Apple Watch tap my wrist every 15 minutes, which I know is super annoying for some people, and they think it's obnoxious. It's necessary for me, otherwise I completely lose track of time and life is completely gone and I don't even realize what just happened. So I did this and I'm pretty good about, standing up straight or, having better posture when it goes off. As far as like all the mental stuff that goes with it, I can't say there's really any. I found zero benefit from that mentally. Physically, my back doesn't hurt as much. So there's that. So I'll take that one. I'll keep doing it just
Yeah.
because physical pain. But And I'm talking about very, very minor, like soreness is what I'm talking about. Not like I can hardly sit up. I'm exaggerating this quite a bit to make a point, but yeah, I'll keep doing it. The second of the two was to say yes more to my kids. Uh, I started doing this and, trying to make sure that I was saying yes more often than no, just because that was what I was wanting to try. And then I was reminded, have you ever seen, there's a movie called Yes Day. Have you seen this? I
I
don't know
have
if I
not.
recommend it or not. There's not really any known actors or anything to it, but we watched this with our kids. Basically, the moral of the story was that the parents were not allowed to say no to their kids for the entire day.
Oh boy.
And it was planned ahead of time, and there were boundaries like we can't kill people. We cannot go outside of 25 miles from our house, and we can't spend more than this amount of money. Like there was some restraints they'd put on it. But I'd forgotten about the movie entirely until I got about halfway through this last 2 weeks. And I was at one point talked to my kids and said, I'm trying to say yes to you guys more often. And like, ooh, can we do a yes day? It's like, absolutely not. Like I will, I will do a no on that one. Not going quite that far, but played a lot more games than I have been. I'm getting the whole let's play horsey, let's play ballerina. Yes, super fun. If you hadn't guessed, I have 3 girls. There you go. So yeah,
Yeah. The uh the bearded ballerina.
yeah, I know, right? It's like do the whole.
Nice.
So yeah, no, it was good. I'll try to keep that one up, but keep both of them up, I guess. But saying yes to the kids is more fun than I expected. But at the same time, like, no, you cannot have 6 pieces of cake. There is a line here.
Sure. Well, that's cool. I did not have any action items from the last book, which was the 12 Rules for Life, but did have a couple of instances to make fun of it while I was on my trip.
Okay.
Saw skateboarders at Lake Arrowhead. So obviously I did not disturb the kids on their skateboards.
Good job. See, you're already
That's
learning
the
from the
goal.
book. Good job.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess time to get into today's book then, huh?
Sure. Take us down the path.
The Pathless Path.
Oh,
Uh,
got it.
that is today's book, The Pathless Path by Paul Millard. And this was one that originally I had heard of because it was listed in one of Ali Abdal's videos on like influential books, kind of like the influential podcasts video that he did, but forgot to link to us at the
Yep.
beginning.
Yep.
If you're listening, Ali, love you, but
We got to bring this
let's
up
try.
like every other episode.
So then it came up again. He did a dedicated video on this specific book, and Toby had brought this to my attention the first time that he mentioned it. Then the second time he mentioned it, he's like, "Dad, we should get this book." And basically, anytime Toby suggests a book that I am even remotely interested in, I buy it. By the way, that's a rule for life. If you trust somebody and they make a comment, even in passing, about a good book that they've read, buy it immediately.
It's
I've
totally
been doing
valid.
that for years. Yep. And it may sound like a lot of money, but it's really not. I mean, you're not buying thousands of books a year, I don't think,
I
but
hope.
maybe. So, yeah, this one came up a couple of times and it looked good. So I bought it. I bought the hardcover version. Which version did you get?
I got the hardback. Yeah.
Okay. So does yours have like a weird material on the cover and the pages aren't cut very well?
I can't say that that was my experience. No.
Okay. Well, I got the book feels weird. It's like a different sort of coating on the cover, at least for mine.
Hmm.
And I brought it with me to the retreat, and everybody there made the same comment when they picked it up, like, "Whoa, this one feels kind of weird." And when I got it, about half of the pages were stuck together. I had to like physically rip them apart page by page
Okay.
because it just wasn't cut very well. But that can happen, I suppose. But all that to say, this doesn't feel, I don't know if it's self-published. I kind of think it is because there's no publisher
It
name
is, yeah,
on
because
it.
he mentions in the book at one point that he did all the stuff around it and had it printed and such.
Sure. So it's it feels like a self-published book. But I think that's just comments on the outside. We'll get to the inside here in a little bit, but broken into two parts. Part one is the default path, where he kind of shares his story, and then part two is the pathless path, and that's kind of where he gets into the, I don't want to say strategies or tips, but kind of like the thought perspective and the more general application of the concepts. Part one has 6 chapters. Chapter one's an introduction, which, by the way, I kind of like that they actually called the introduction chapter one
I
instead of having
see.
that
I don't remember
separately.
what the book was. It Chris Bailey had like the introduction is chapter 0. I've always really liked that concept, but that's me being a computer nerd that like developer world that just wants it to be starting at 0. So that's me.
I mean, that is a that is a legit uh, way to do it too, I think. But I don't like the separate section as introduction. It
Yeah,
always
yeah.
feels weird. But yeah, so chapter one, introduction. Chapter two, getting ahead. Chapter three, work, work, work. Chapter four, awakening. Chapter five, breaking free. Chapter six, the first steps. Then you go into part two, and in there we've got chapter seven, wisdom of the pathless path. Chapter eight, redefine success. Chapter nine, the real work of our lives. And then chapter 10, playing the long game. Now, before we dive into the content of the book itself, I got to get your reaction when you picked this one up, or even when I said I wanted to read it. What were you thinking? Because I think there's probably a couple different scenarios or options available here.
Well, first reaction was just purely off of the title because I had not heard of it at all. So whenever you mentioned The Pathless Path by Paul Millard, I completely new title to me at all. My first thought was, of course, that sounds like a Mike book to me, and so that was my first reaction. When I got it, I can't say that I had any issues with quality of the book. I just want to point that out. It's like mine just felt like a normal. It just feels like a standard hardback to me. None of the pages stuck together at all. It was all straight, all the things. I have a tendency to notice immediately if there's a publisher mark on the spine of the book, which this one does not have, which immediately told me it was a self-published book. And then, of course, that sets some radar bells off. Like, it's not always a bad thing. Like, there are some that we've had that are really, really good that are in that territory. It kind of skews the other way typically. So it kind of made me like, okay, let's keep our guard up here a little bit. But yeah, I can't say that I had any like this is going to be a terrible book. I didn't have any of that at all. I think if I had picked up the book and it had a really weird feel to it and the pages were all stuck together, I would maybe be scared of what I was about to get into. But I didn't have that. I'm kind of grateful that I didn't have that because I came at this with a better expectation than I would have given the other scenario.
Yeah, I was a little nervous. Like, what did I get myself into?
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, overall, I think it was a pretty good book, and I'm excited to talk through it. Maybe let's jump into chapter one here, which is the introduction. And again, this is in the first part, which is kind of where he's telling his story. And this is the default path. And when he talks about the default path, he's basically talking about the path that society kind of just unconsciously funnels people down, which is go to college, get a job, climb the ladder, accumulate a bunch of wealth, right? He was on that path. He was making $200,000 a year in New York City, and then started to question, like, is there another option? Um, he's got different parts of his story that he tells in the different chapters. I don't want to keep coming back to that story though. So I just kind of want to get it all out of the way here in the introduction. I
Okay, that'd be
want to
good because
discuss
it's
some
kind
of
of
the
reiterated a
concepts.
lot. So
It is. It is. So one of the details that I liked was that he accidentally quit his job. He was at some thing on a day he was out, but he's doing email on his phone anyways because he's getting pulled into these projects. And he's arguing with his manager over something and then makes a comment on one of the emails like, I'm not sure if this is the right place for me, which his manager took as his resignation. That would be pretty scary, I think. But kudos to Paul. He used it as an opportunity to rethink things, and that's kind of what he's setting up here in chapter one in the introduction. I don't think there's a whole lot of other details from his story that I want to unpack. Was there anything that kind of stood out to you?
I just that like the overall story is that he was headed down the fast track of like corporate elite world, going to, McKinsey with the, big consulting firms and GM. That didn't sound right
I
for
think
some
so.
reason. Anyway, he's going down that path of like elite careers, if you will, and finds out he hates it, ends up being burnt out. It's not all that it's cracked up to be. Has some health issues, which we'll probably cover here in a bit, but then he overcomes that and then starts down this whole path of kind of going wherever he wants, traveling all over the place and doing work freelance style. So, big
Yep.
picture, that's his story. If you want to get that out of the way and not have to reiterate this throughout the rest of the episode, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good storyteller and the details are entertaining and worth the read, but for the sake of the discussion here, um yeah, I think that's a good synopsis. The end result is that he's traveling the world, he meets the love of his life, and they are completely happy on a lot less than he was making in the day job, and it kind of all revolves around defining for yourself what success should look like. So now back to chapter one, introduction. This is where he starts the it plants the seeds or lays the foundation for that discussion about the default path. He finds it as a series of decisions and accomplishments needed to be seen as a successful adult. And I think that definition can resonate with just about anyone. He says on page 11 that many people find it difficult to create change in their lives because they lack someone who believes in them. That convicted me because I not only I think have felt that myself, but I think I'm at the point now where I could be that person who can help somebody else who just needs someone to say, you got what it takes. But the other big thing here is that most people think they have to have things all figured out by the time they're 25, and I definitely felt that as well. Uh, my career arc is kind of non-traditional, so you might look at my experience and be like, "Well, that doesn't really make any sense. You've kind of like gone against the grain in that area." But I've definitely felt what he's describing there. And I've definitely felt the sense of responsibility associated with that. Like, well, you're married, you have a family, you have to provide. And that is definitely a responsibility. I'm not saying like you should be able to just shirk those things, but I think what he's saying is that we get so attached to the responsibilities and they're kind of anchored in this worst case scenario, which forces people into the default path. And so, right at the beginning here, I am feeling the call.
I have to like as I process like some of my own career path, like I've been on a whole bunch of different trajectories and have always kind of worked semi close to tech, and in the middle of it, but it's always been following that default path, and it's one that I can't say I've ever had a reason to not go down that road, but this at least I think it was helpful, at least in this part, to define it. The thing that I kind of struggled with is like it started to feel like almost like I've heard this before, and I'll maybe save some of my thoughts on that for a little later because he does bring that up in another spot, and then it struck me. But he he kind of has this, you don't have to follow the ideas that are set in front of, like, you don't have to follow through on people's expectations and be careful of the things that you feel like you should do. I feel like that's really what he's setting it up for here at the very beginning. It's just try to pay attention to the thing, like the unconscious foundational ideas that you're acting on without being, you know, without even comprehending that you're doing that. I feel like that's really what he's trying to set the stage for, is just keep your eyes open. There is this default path, but it doesn't always have to be that way. That to me was like the foundation he was setting up here. He did a good job with it too.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Let's go into the next one here. I think this one will be fairly quick. Chapter 2 is getting ahead, and just jotted a couple of things down from this chapter. Again, this is all kind of rooted in his story, but some of the things that hit me was he said that it can be difficult to pick when there are so many options. I definitely feel that. My way of getting around that is been, I think, to say yes and. So do do all the things that I want to do. Obviously, you have to say no at some point, so it's not do all the things, but try all the things. And the way to try all the things is to not assume that you have to go full time with all the things. You know, I'm not a full time podcaster. I'm not a full time YouTuber. I dabble in these things, but enough to know what I like about them and what I don't like about them. And I feel like that's important because ultimately, what you want to avoid is kind of the big questions he's asking here. You know, one of them, he says, "What am I living for?" Another one is, "What do I really want?" The third one, "How do I want to look back on my life when it's my time to go?" I don't want to get to the end of my life and have regrets because I was too scared to try something. And I really am feeling that now as I'm reading this. My oldest son is about to get his temps, and I'm realizing like time is going quickly, and he's going to be at the point where he's going to be making some of these decisions in his life very soon. And I want to be an example more than a advisor when it comes to this stuff. So, really what I wanna model for him is the courage to try the things even if you maybe did it once and it didn't work out, you know, that doesn't mean that it doesn't work. Embrace the growth mindset and figure out what you can do better if it really is something that you are passionate about, which again does not mean something that you like to do, but something that really is meaningful to you, something you're willing to suffer to see come about, then, be willing to do the hard things and figure out ways to make it work. And the other thing he mentions in here is to beware cracks in your career identity. I like this. I interpret this, the cracks in your career identity, basically as like you've assembled this persona of who you are and what you do. In fact, if you go to a party or a gathering, chances are when you first meet someone, they're going to ask you, like, what do you do? Right. So, whatever your default response is, you know, that's your career identity. And if it's something that is like really meaningful to you and you're excited when you say it, then you're probably good. But if you're like, well, that feels a little bit disingenuous to frame it that way, that would be a crack in your career identity.
Yeah, it's in this chapter that he mentions his health crisis that he works through, and I just want to point this out because this was like the turning point for him, and it's one that I can relate with. But he was going down like this corporate ladder thing, starting to realize that maybe this isn't quite right, but didn't know what else to do. And then he finds out he has Lyme disease, and he was explaining some of his process for trying to beat this. And like, I've been there, like I've had Lyme, I've been through it, beaten the thing, but all the stuff that he explained from a normal doctor and their methods of treating that, and it not working. Like, yeah, I get it. Like that's just like the standard procedure. So I kind of feel bad for him in that sense. So you can't really go the traditional route on that one, it seems. But that particular health crisis for him basically snapped him out of the process of trying to go down the default path and trying to continually climb the ladder, always looking for the pay raise, always looking for the next better thing, and becoming a classic hoop jumper, as he calls it. And
Hmm.
this is the spot where he starts to try to figure out, okay, well, what could the alternative be? And that's the break point for him. So I was really glad he explained it in that sense. He brings it up a few times throughout the rest of the book, but it's similar to like, sometimes people can't really make big changes unless there's a complete crisis moment.
Hmm.
And it's those that we've talked about this before where if you have a crisis moment, sometimes that's where the hard change can come about. Like that's sometimes where that can be a positive. So that's exactly what happened for him. So I was just glad he shared it.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that story until you brought it back up again, but it makes sense that that would resonate with you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and kind of the framing of that story, which it sounds like he's worked through it, was my interpretation of that. But um, the reason he shared that was that it forced him to think non-traditionally about his work because he couldn't show up. He
Right.
didn't have the energy. He wasn't well enough to do it. But most jobs aren't going to look favorably if you say, "Well, I'm not feeling great." Okay, how long are you going to be out? And you say 6 months.
Right. Right. Yeah. Just to, and some employers can help with that. Like whenever I had Lyme, I was in the middle of trying to do a contract for a corporation, and that contract went south and all sorts of bad things happened. But I ended up leaving that work to come work for the church full time. And I was like in the depths of Lyme disease at the time. And I told them, like, here's the deal. Like, I'm not 100% and won't be for a while. And they were fine with that. They said, take care of yourself. If it gets to where a day is too much, just go home. Like, if it gets to where you feel like you can't drive home, go lay down on a couch somewhere. Like, they were totally cool with that process and were willing to support me in that process. Um, and obviously, having gotten past that and being where I'm at now, that's served them very well. But I don't think I could have successfully maintained a full time job without that kind of grace involved. So, in the traditional job role world, that would have been catastrophe. It really would have been.
Right. Well, speaking of full-time jobs, let's go into the next section. That's the perfect place to do it because chapter 3 is work, 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 and the big idea from here, I would say, is that the 40-hour work week is a fairly new construct. He mentions in here that the German historian Max Weber founded found that the spirit of capitalism failed to take hold on societies that had a traditionalist view of work. And this is just in other cultures where they work as much as they need to support their current lifestyle and then they stop. It's kind of a uniquely, I'll say American thing, but I'm sure it's beyond the United States, where you continue to work to accumulate as much as you possibly can. And then he talks about how the period from 1946 to 1980, where this 40-hour work week was kind of established, that was not the norm in the totality of human history. It was sort of an anomaly. And this whole idea of work life balance, that is an idea that sounds like it belongs in another era, is how he put it. And I think I maybe tend to agree with him after a couple of statistics that he shared, because he said that the US is one of the strongest wage-based societies in the world, but only about 40% of adult Americans have jobs where they work more than 35 hours per week. That seemed low to me. And yes, I know that there are older Americans that would fall into that category that have retired. But he also said almost all job growth from 2005 to 2015 was for alternative or non traditional jobs. So basically, what he's saying here is that the thing that we tell ourselves everybody is doing this, there are actually fewer and fewer people doing that. So he's trying to inspire us to think about work a little bit differently, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking the number was actually less than that, less than the 40%. I had 26% in my head. I don't know where that came from. Maybe that was a
Mm.
different stat. Sometimes I get numbers transposed like that. But regardless, it's true. Like fewer and fewer people just have a classic day job, 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever you want to do, however you want to work it. But we tend to think like work is life. Like you were saying earlier, like we identify with the job, the career that we have, and not necessarily what we do for leisure and making that a priority. I think we'll get there here before long. But I I know that I sometimes see like work is the thing that I do and that's all I do. I know that I have that mentality regularly. So much so like I have to track my time that I'm at work, not because I need to make sure I'm putting in enough time, but so that I quit on time. Like I'm backwards on that because I make sure like, okay, I'm at 41 hours this week or will be by the time the end of Sunday hits. I need to go home at noon today or I'm going to be sitting at like 45, 46 hours. Like that's my mentality on it. And it's just because I know like my tendency is like I just want to keep doing things. I don't know why that is per se. I mean, I know I really like what I do, but that's me. The workaholic can be.
And like 46 hours, I think that is what you shared there. Like
That
there
would
are a
be my
lot of
average,
people.
yeah. If I didn't
Okay.
like there are weeks like that's me tracking to make sure I don't hit that because there are weeks where if I didn't keep track of it like that, I would easily be in the 55 range without even realizing what I was doing.
Right. And that was kind of my point is like you described that as workaholic tendencies, and I think I would tend to agree with you because really it's just in your general default response. Well, I'm going to keep working because there's more things that need to get done. But there are a lot of people who would take that 46 number or even the 55 number and be like, "Ha, that's not a workaholic because they're
Right,
doing 80-hour
right.
weeks."
Yeah. I think back to my farm days when, an 80-hour work week, not work period, work
Yep.
week was the norm. So, yes.
But even, like, comparing those numbers, he that's the wrong approach, right? But
Mhm.
it's interesting to me because the minute that you share any of those numbers, you I found myself immediately thinking back to, like, my timery data and how much do I work, trying to locate myself in that
Yeah.
spectrum.
Yeah. How do I compare to
So,
that? Yeah.
yeah, but that's not what we should be doing. We should be defining what's the right thing for us. And I guess that's a good place to go into the next chapter. So let's do that. Let's go into chapter 4, which is awakening. And this is kind of just thinking differently about not just work, but what your life could look like. He asked the question, and I jotted this down in my mind note file. What does a life not centered around work look like? I, I'm not sure I know.
Yeah. It's such a normal thing that it's tough to get your head around that. Like I've asked this question, oh, probably for at least 3 years now. It's like, what would it look like if I could somehow get paid to live the lifestyle that I want in a way that would pay all the bills and let me have some semblance of a savings? Like, what does a lifestyle look like that you could get paid to have? That's a weird question to ask, but I feel like that's what he's getting at here.
Kind of. And I think you're right. That's kind of what he's driving at. But I think there's different flavors of that which are more interesting to me. Which I mean, the life theme thing is big for me.
Yeah.
So I think you could view your work as just a job, or you could view it as your vocation or a calling. And if you do land in one of those latter buckets, there's probably the tendency to think, well, I really like what I do. I just want to keep doing it forever. So it's easy to excuse. But even in those scenarios, imagine, you're a carpenter or somebody who uses their hands all the time, or maybe like a, a writer, I guess, like I use my keyboard, but if I all of a sudden could not use my hands to type, and that part of my identity was removed, like what would be left and how would I feel about that? And there are different things, different roles, different responsibilities that I have, which I found myself kind of thinking, oh, well, I'd lean on this to help fill that gap. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a elder in our church. I help lead the men's ministry. If it all ended tomorrow and I didn't have to go to work to get money to live, maybe I would like do those things more. But I really didn't have a concrete, this is really who Mike Schmitz is and what he does. So it's a little bit challenging to me. I guess with the life theme stuff, kind of what I've been doing, and I don't necessarily think this is wrong, is to filter the things that I am doing through that life theme. Because in my experience, when you do that, if they are the right things, you gain the motivation to do them. If they are the wrong things, you gain the clarity to say no to them. But when you force yourself to envision a future where work itself is removed from you, that is a little bit challenging to say the least.
What does it look like to go do the things you love to do every single day? Right? And I feel like this is it's weird and it's difficult to grasp because at least for me because what are the things you love to do? And we immediately start thinking of hobbies, right? Some people play board games, some people go fishing, build cars, like people do all sorts of stuff for a hobby. But if you didn't have to go to work, would you actually do that all day every day? If the answer is yes, then is there a way you get paid to do that? But then does that change the dynamic such that it's not what you love anymore and then you've come up with a different hobby? Like this is the cyclical, this is the way my brain works. If that's the case, then I don't want to do that all day every day. Like I would likely have like 12 different things that I just cycle between because I'm obnoxious like that. But I have a hard time grasping what that would even look like. What does, like you're saying, what does life look like if you don't have a work bucket
Mm.
that you're filling all the time?
And it's not even you don't have a work bucket. I don't think he's saying this is continue doing what you've been doing or stop everything you've been doing and just go do the things that you enjoy doing. Because he mentions also in this chapter that many people view their compensation as a measure of their worth. So the challenge is thinking through the balance of things and what actually is enough. So many people, I think, would be attached to their work, even if they absolutely hate it, because it provides a level of security and they justify it by their take home pay. And that just kind of anchors them. Well, this thing is immovable. This is a big rock that goes into my life bucket, and everything else has to fit around it. But the other thing that I jotted down here is that you have to be able to imagine an alternate life. So if you were to envision that rock being removed, it opens up other possibilities. It doesn't mean that you can't put other work related things back in there, but think about what are some of the other alternatives? What are the other options that are available? We tend to just gravitate to the thing that we know because it feels safe, it feels secure, especially when you couch it through, well, I have a responsibility as the breadwinner for my family and I've got mouths to feed, yada, yada, yada. That's true, but there are other ways that you could do that. And it can be difficult, I guess, without an encouragement from someone like Paul in chapter 4 to think about the other possibilities that are available to you. Going back to Master Your Motivation by Susan Fowler, one of the things that derives motivation is choice. right? So what are the choices that are available to you? We tend to attach to, this is the thing that I've chosen to do and I'm going to do it for the next 30 years and that's it. Never think about it again because it's safe, it's secure. I know it's going to be there.
That I think that's the hard part with this. One of the hardest parts I think with this whole concept is just going to a job is like the safe easy bet for an income, right? Because it's difficult to get away from the need for an income unless you have somehow managed to slip away from tax structures entirely and can raise all of your own food and produce all of your own energy and handle all of your own waste. Like this gets to be a lot to take care of, which, you know, people can do that. I don't know many people that have successfully done all of that. And yet, what is the alternative to the day job? And are you able to put together pieces of things that generate enough of an income that you can be content with that and live a fulfilling life? Like that's I think the open-ended question here is, what does that look like for you
Mhm.
specifically? Like and he does it. He can show you story after story of people who have done this, who took 18 months off and went sailing for a year and a half. Like people can do that, but I have no interest in that. Number one, I would be seasick. But I don't think that particular scenario is not one for me. But I don't know how to work through the process of determining what this non day jobby world might look like. So I have all sorts of ways I could maybe try to figure that out, but I'm also not certain that my current day job is one that I would want to leave either, because I feel like it very likely fits very well with what I personally want to have as a day lifestyle type, but I don't know that. It's partly why I'm going through your thing. We'll find out.
All right, we'll find out together. The next chapter is chapter 5, and that is breaking free. So, this is kind of assuming that you do want to leave the day job. There's some interesting statistics and quotes and things in here, including from his personal story. He shares that when he left one of his jobs, forget exactly which one.
Yeah, I had a
Um,
handful of them.
yeah, he says that he stayed in the job 3 months, which he defined as about 3 months too long. And, takeaway for me from that, and I think I knew this already, was that if you are thinking about a job transition, you don't want to drag it out longer than it needs to be. He talks about how burnout happens to people who are dedicated and committed, trying to balance their need to give, to please others, and to work hard. And that kind of resonated with me. I shared previously that I dealt with burnout at the beginning of the year, had a mild panic attack. Um, and he uses a quote from Gary Chernus, who says that burnout is the bureaucratic infringement on a professional's autonomy. Not sure I agree with that 100%, but I think there is some truth to that. The thing that can be stressful about the professional situations can be the fact that there are so many moving pieces and so many other people relying on you that you feel like you can't let other people down. Page 68 says if you're suffering from burnout, you are likely not thriving at work, and over time it's easy to see yourself as the cause. I feel like this I felt this a little bit. So I mentioned dealing with burnout, but also I tend to take the personal responsibility route to this and assume that it's just as much, if not more so, my fault than people around me. That may be right, it may not be right, but I feel like there's little you can do to change other people. There's a lot more you can do to change yourself. I'm not sure what to do with this quote, I guess, but I take it as like a warning sign. Basically, what I'm getting from this chapter is that my personality is kind of working against me at this point, and I'm my own worst enemy. um, he ends this chapter, well, not the very end, but the last thing I jotted down was that if work dominated your every moment, would life be worth living? It sounds like for you with your day job that and you're not convinced you want to think about other scenarios. I'm putting words in your mouth, but correct me if I'm wrong here. You maybe would have like a well, I don't know, sort of a answer to that. For me, it was pretty easy. I work to live, don't live to work, right? So this kind of challenges me to rethink my relationship with work. Not saying that you're going to love what you do all the time, but um, again, what are the other options? I've been so attached to this is who I am and this is what I do. And I really just feel at this point in the book, I gotta put everything under the microscope.
Yeah.
And everything is on the chopping block. Is it no longer doing certain creative projects that like so be it. But I gotta figure out what the right mix is. Also, just full disclosure, I'm 40 years old. So as I'm reading through this, I'm like, am I having a midlife crisis?
Okay, honesty coming out now. All right. Yep. I see. I see.
But I don't think I am. I've talked to a lot of people about this and how I've felt about things the last several months, and having other people kind of confirm the things that I'm seeing um, makes me feel like I'm not just making up this story in my head. It's quite possible. Dave Gray, liminal thinking. I've surrounded myself with people who are going to see things the same way I am, but I do my best to not do that and get different perspectives. So doing my best to fight against it, but if I am, well, I guess it is what it is. But
I think, in my scenario, and I don't know that you're putting words on my mouth because I know that if I did my day job all day, every day, every moment, were it not for the fact that I have a family that I'm trying to raise, like let's ignore that particular piece, though that's a difficult thing for me to ignore. If that were the case, like I think I would still do that. Like I love being able to support the church and its mission in the ways that I do. And there are some feats that we're able to pull off that can create scenarios for people to have some experiences that are not otherwise possible if I don't do what I do. So that's something that I know, at least for me, is encouraging in the process. At the same time, like you're saying, like there's always stuff that you don't want to do that's a part of any work scenario. There's always pieces of that. So I know that for me, the current day job is likely still a piece of the pie. I don't really know what the alternative stuff there is though, because like I do know that it's possible that I've got a handful of other like side things that I do that can support what I do as a day job that are more lifestyle based that I do with my kids and such. So that's probably the area that I want to evaluate more so than the day job piece. But I don't know if that's me. Like the hard part with this is like, well, is that just me being complacent and not being willing to embrace the ideas that Paul is pitching here? Or is that actually where I feel like I should be? And I don't know the answer to that question. That's one of those like, am I just not wanting to acknowledge the question is a good one, or is that actually my answer? I sometimes struggle to nail down which side of that coin I sit on.
yeah, well, no one can answer that for you, unfortunately.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. Thanks for the
Sorry.
help.
But that does kind of lead into the next chapter. So let's go there. The last chapter in this first part is chapter 6, the first steps. And this is really about confronting the fear. So I think that is a possibility from what you were just sharing, because he does say in this section that most people will choose certain discomfort and coping mechanisms over uncertain discomfort. And that's not saying that your job is horrible. So don't read that wrong, but it's easy to anchor on the things you don't like. And basically, when it comes to making choices that are going to eliminate pain, because there's only two motivators, right? The elimination of pain and the pursuit of pleasure. When you boil it down, most people will anchor on the pain. That's the stronger one. So if something is causing you pain, but you have a coping mechanism in place, which kind of reminds me of that burnout inventory that I took, people will default towards that instead of embracing something that is uncertain, even if the potential of the uncertain future could be much greater than anything you'd ever imagined. You're just naturally not going to consider those things. Now, only you can decide for yourself whether the thing that you're doing right now is really something that hits the mark and you absolutely love doing it, or it's fear that's holding you back. But that's what I was wrestling with in this section was what have I been afraid of? And he kind of talks in here about how many people don't actually make a leap. They just kind of prototype a new life until they find something that works. And most life transitions aren't boiled down to a single event. And then he, at the end of this chapter, or the last thing I jotted down, was this whole thing about fear setting. Are you familiar with the concept of fear setting?
This is a Tim Ferriss thing, right?
Yep. Yeah. So fear setting, first time I came across this concept, anyways, was the Tim Ferriss. I think it's a TED talk. So I'll try to grab a link to that and put it in the show notes. But essentially, what this is that you think worst case scenario. And I did actually think through this with my wife. I didn't tell her we were doing this. I just kind of threw it
Just
out and
started
be like,
asking
"Hey,
questions. Hey, what
yeah,
about?
exactly." And she's like, "What the heck?"
That's always fun because then when you're done, it's like, oh, by the way, this is that process we just walked through. Like, wait, you're doing a
Y-
thing on me? Okay. Again, Joe?
Yeah. So
Really?
essentially, what it is like, and the way he's defining it right now, you write down the change that you are making, although I would argue you're considering making, right? Because this is a thought exercise before you actually make that leap. And then you list out all of the worst case scenarios. And really, the point of this is that your brain will manufacture something that is a lot worse until you get it down on paper and then you realize that it's not really all that bad. So you write down all the worst case scenarios, then you identify the actions that you could take right now to mitigate those negative outcomes. And when you do that, you're like, huh, this really isn't all that scary. Right. And then from there, the other things he wrote down are list some steps or actions you might take to get back to where you are today. What could be some benefits of an attempt or even partial success if you were to embrace this new thing? And what is the cost of inaction in 3, 6, or 12 months? So, interesting exercise that I would recommend people do if they are thinking about something and they realize that fear is the thing that is holding them back, because what you may realize from this is that really fear shouldn't have that big a hold of you. That's also quite possible, I think, if you do this. I haven't experienced this, but I could foresee a scenario where you do this and you're like, actually, yeah, that sounds really bad. Let's not do that. But that's not the outcome that he is portraying from doing this exercise, obviously.
Yeah, chapter 6 is one where like I started to maybe doubt him a little bit in this process because when he mentioned Tim Ferriss here, I I connected some dots around like when we read the 4-hour work week. There was definitely an emphasis on travel as the end game. Like that was like you travel the world and see things and experience everything you can. And it occurred to me that like that's what he was doing as part of this process. Like as going back to his life story, which we said we weren't going to do. He was going to different countries and experiencing these things. Like travel was a big part of, and going to live places was a big part of his process. I don't want that. And it seems like that was, he never said that that was the end game and that that was the thing, but he definitely, I feel kind of misses out on a lot of things in the process of him choosing that particular lifestyle, which then makes me maybe question some of his thoughts and his ideas here, just because if travel is what you're going to do and you're always going to be like leaving the friends that you just made and never building like deep relationships, save with one person that you're traveling with as your spouse, that to me, that feels very empty and like you're missing out on something much bigger. So then it makes me kind of put my guard up a little bit more around the ideas that this person is sharing with me, just because I know we're coming from very different places on a foundational level. This is really where that started to hit me a little bit, which then made me like process back on all the things that we've just gone over. Like I don't think he's wrong in this process and encouraging the creativity and encouraging you to explore this path. Just maybe makes me put it a more intense microscope on it a little bit, just so I'm not getting thrown off. Maybe this is unfounded, but that was just kind of where my brain went.
Well, I think that's a very natural reaction. And to be honest, I had the same initial thought. Like, well, you're creating this image of the good life that isn't what I want for the good life. Mine looks different. But I don't think that invalidates the challenges that he's sharing in this first part about thinking different about the options. Just because his ideal future looks different than yours or mine would doesn't mean that we shouldn't entertain it, or because it looks different to think that it's not possible. It's just going to be different.
Yeah,
I think
yeah. And again, I
that-
don't think I'm saying that the stuff we've covered so far in this book is wrong. It was just a thing that made me realize, hmm, does the end result alter his recommendations, I guess? Like, is
sure.
the end result that he's after, that his goal is, does that impact and give him a strong bias in the process and the ideas that he's recommending? I don't think the ideas that he's recommending here, like everything we've covered, like work is not necessarily what life always has been. Like even, and I didn't mention this, but in chapter 5, he's got this thing on towards the beginning of it, like the ancient Greek word for work was simply not at leisure, because
Yeah.
leisure was like the bulk, and then when you were working, it was like you were not doing what you normally do. So it's like completely flipped. Like I totally get that, like totally with you, 100%. And even it doesn't, you don't have to go very far back in history to get to a point where people like uh, worked as a lifestyle to raise animals and crops for their own sustenance, and any what they would call work for income was a fairly small amount of the time that they spent. Like you don't have to go very far back in time to get to that era. So like the world that we're living in today is not common, which is exactly what he was saying. Like this is not a normal thing. So I can't say that I'm completely invalidating everything. That's not what I'm getting at all. It just made me pay attention a little bit more. I guess that's the main point.
Sure. Well, let's actually go into the next part here because I feel he's going to kind of speak to this a little bit in chapter 7, which is the wisdom of the pathless path. One of the things that I jotted down in this chapter as an action item is to define my rich life, which I think is exactly what you're getting at there. He's defined his rich life, which looks very different than my rich life, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't consider what a rich life actually looks like.
Right. Right.
And then he also says in here that nothing good gets away so long as you create the space to let it emerge. That sounds a little woo woo, but I think maybe there is some truth to that.
Woo
I've
woo.
got a I've got a gap book that I read on the plane. I read the new Stephen Pressfield book,
Okay.
and he defines it as like the universe expands when you are brave, basically. I'm butchering the phrasing, but he uses that picture of the universe and the resistance, right? When you conquer the resistance, the universe is there to accommodate you, essentially. And they're both kind of saying the same thing, I think, which is that when you're brave enough to consider an alternative, even if you don't really know exactly what it's going to look like, you know, you do have the capacity to receive it, but not until you make the decision and there's some space or some margin there. I'm doing a bad job of explaining this, but essentially I think what he's saying is that when you make the choice, that's when you'll see the options. And I think there's truth to that. He also says here that on page 113, having faith is admitting you don't have all the answers for what comes next. So that is a key element, I think, here. And really just encouraging us that no matter what what decision you're trying to make or what your pathless path looks like, what your rich life looks like, you're never going to have it all figured out, and it's never going to be a decision that makes perfect sense. The one that makes perfect sense is the one that you already know. If you're going to be analytical and logical about it, you're never going to make that decision.
This is one of the areas where like he starts to redeem some of what I was just getting at because and I'm glad you used that as a segue too because in this piece it's like you're saying like you don't always know the full picture of where you're going to land. Like if you could, you would probably alter it and that's not always best. But as I reflect on like my own process for getting to where I am today, I know that there've been a lot of times when I've like taken a step and then I don't know what comes next, but I know that this is the right next step. I can't tell you what step 2 is. This is not a chess game where I can lay out the next 3, 4, 5, 6 steps in my attack. This is just I know the next one and that's it. Sometimes I know 2, but rarely do I know more than that. And just trying to make the decision for what the next step is, that I can get on board with that. If you can nail down what the next one is, it may scare you half to death, that next step and what it needs to be, but at least you're taking the step instead of just being complacent and just going with whatever happens to you. And that's usually where you get people throwing a fit and complaining because life is so hard. It's like, well, do something about it. Like, get off the couch. That's my mentality. But yeah, the next step, like I'm totally on board with that.
Well, I think that's the powerful thing about this book is yeah, you're right. Like you and I both have that same perspective. I think instead of complaining that things are so bad, and they may be bad and they may not be your fault, but that doesn't help you until you take ownership and you say, I'm going to actually change this. Uh, that is when your life can start to turn around. And really, what he's saying is not even beyond like the accepting the personal responsibility part. Imagine if you were the only one who was in charge of your success, right? If you really were the captain of your own ship, because he does talk about that people's pathless path stories share 4 steps. They become aware of their own suffering, curiosity reemerges, they desire to continue their non-work journey, and that's really like just like the non-default journey. And then the fourth one is that they write.
I got a kick out
I
of
think
that.
that may be a little bit biased, although that probably is true. I mean, especially with the age that we live in and the internet and the creator economy, and I really think this is sort of the undertone of a lot of stuff that he's sharing, but I don't think he explicitly says this. Like, there never has been a better time to find your pathless path because the tools are there for you to reach just about anybody. And if you are able to help people, which really is the whole idea behind all of this, um, then the opportunities are there for you in abundance. Actually, let's go on to the next section because in the next section he kind of speaks to that specifically. So he mentions chapter 8, redefine success. The second stage of success is when you shift from what you lack to what you offer. And that's kind of what I was just describing. So instead of trying to accumulate things, you're looking for what can I give in terms of value to other people. And then he mentions that the internet makes it easy to find micro communities. I love this quote on page 124. It says the internet does enable negative groups to form. So he's not, disregarding that. But we pay far too much attention to these communities and not enough to the positive connections and life options made possible all over the world for people who are online. 100% yes. And I think this is the thing that bothers me about all of the noise that I've seen about, oh, Twitter is toxic, I'm moving to Mastodon. Everybody that I've seen that has said that has already made the connections. They don't need them anymore. So it's like, I'm just going to take my ball and go home. Me and my buddies are going to go chat over here
Yep.
because I don't need the internet, and I don't need to find these people. I don't need to find my tribe that way. My tribe is going to follow me wherever the heck I go. And I think if you're in that position, cool. Like, kudos to you. But I just think that we tend to focus on all the bad stuff that happens. And he's basically saying, yeah, that there is bad stuff that happens. People suck. That is true. But there also is some great opportunities if you're able to look past that stuff. And that's kind of how I feel as well.
The whole Twitter Mastodon thing is just annoying to me because, like you're saying, like the people who throw a fit about Twitter and move generally have the luxury of being able to do that because their following is large enough that people just go with them, or it just doesn't matter what their social media following is.
They're
Uh,
not dependent on Twitter for their
yeah,
business in any way, shape, or form.
and that's fine.
Yep,
Uh,
it is fine.
I have to admit though that the amount of yelling, complaining, name calling, negativity on Twitter on my feed has dropped significantly since this big exodus away from Twitter towards Mastodon. Like, that's been a positive that a lot of people have left Twitter for me, which has been weird. And yet now my previous Mastodon feed was generally positive and people talking about like how can tech get this feature or that feature, or hey, check out the new way that kangaroos can swim, like all this stuff. And now a lot of that negativity has gone over to Mastodon. For me, this is just purely one person's experience. So like that negativity went to Mastodon for me. That's just it's so weird. Like it's my experience has been exactly backwards for what some folks are saying. All of this aside, uh, the concept of like trying to help people and serve people, like if that's the thing, like and that's something I think you and I have said for a long time. It's like helping other people is a big part of your life mission and should be. And
Yeah.
if that's not a part of it, you're probably going to get burnt out on it at some point, just because the fulfillment isn't going to be there. So I absolutely like, yeah, that's a big part of this, and I hope everybody can adopt that part.
Yeah, there's some other really great stuff in this chapter too. So the arrival fallacy. This is the problem with goals. I'm not going to go into it, but this definition is great. The idea that when we reach a certain milestone, we will reach a state of lasting happiness. I feel like it's not explicit in the goal setting process, but that's what you fall into by default if you just rely on goals. But he's not talking about it goals per se in this section. He's basically saying that when you start off on the pathless path, you'll be like, oh, once I get to this point, that's when things are going to be easy and fun and yada yada yada. It's not the case.
Right. Yeah.
This is the chapter, by the way, with the 26%. Only 26% of people have a full time job. That was a
There you go.
statistic here.
Got it. That's where that was.
Yeah.
Also, like if you go back to chapter 3, page 44, he talks about meaningful work. It regularly is like when people say they have meaningful work, it generally means that they are overcoming obstacles and defeating pain. Like those are the two
Mhm.
things that they're doing that lead to long-term lasting happiness. So defeating pain is what you're looking for, not ease.
Yeah, and then when you combine it with the idea here of, second stage of success being, instead of getting what you lack, to focusing on what you offer, essentially what you're saying is helping other people eliminate their pain. That's the thing that provides massive value to people. That's what the internet marketplace is all built on. I used to think that when digital marketers talked about the pain points, things like that, they were just trying to manipulate people to get a buck, but that's really not true. I mean, there are people who do that in a sleazy way, but it doesn't have to be, right? That's ultimately what people want. So that's not disingenuous. If you're actually able to help alleviate some of that pain and suffering, then go for it. The other things he mentions here that if we don't define enough, we will always default to more. Guilty. And then the other one was don't play not to lose, play to win. And that phrase has kind of just stuck with me for the last several days. What does that actually look like? I feel like in some ways I have been playing not to lose, but I don't know exactly what that looks like. But I do think I need to think a little bit bigger. What what would winning look like? This is kind of getting back to that action item of defining my rich life. These things are kind of all related. I actually have a couple different action items from this section. The other ones are a little bit later though. So move on to chapter 9.
Yes, sir.
All right. So chapter 9 is the real work of our lives. What is the real work of our lives?
That's a great
That's a pretty
question.
yeah, pretty big question. Um the pathless path he mentions is a solo journey, but you need friends that you can talk to. Uh this is where he talks about building a company that you want to keep working at. And really it's just what is the thing that really is inside of you. There's a quote here from the Gospel of Thomas that I liked. It said, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." There are other quotes here like Henry David Thoreau, "Be resolutely and faithfully what you are." And this is where he says that humans don't mind hardship, they actually thrive on it. What they mind is not feeling necessary. Creativity is by nature an act of boldness and rebellion. That's Robert Greene. But yeah, it's really getting into what is your purpose. This is kind of life theme territory here. And he mentions that there are many ways to express your creativity. You need to ask a lot of questions. They have to be driven by curiosity, not by fear. That's a theme, by the way, throughout the whole book that kind of resonates with me is just being a little bit more curious about things, exploring options, embracing choice, asking myself, what if? But yeah, this is all a setup for playing the long game, which is the next one. So, um, what stood out to you from chapter 9?
I can't say anything specific. Like I have zero notes on that particular chapter. It really just felt like a setup for the last chapter. So we're probably good to go on to that one.
Okay. Well, the last chapter is chapter 10, and that is playing the long game. Uh, this one, I've got a couple different action items from at the very beginning, and they're kind of different versions of the same action item, and they're a different way of thinking about the first one. So the first one I shared, define my rich life. So he kind of challenges the reader, but me in this case, in chapter 10, invert that by asking, what does a miserable life look like? uh, I'm not sure I this will be
I
a
don't
fun
want to answer
exercise.
that one. Like just that. I just don't want to. Like let's just not. Can we not do this, please?
Well, I'm gonna take one for the team and actually do
Oh,
this.
okay.
I don't know if I'm gonna share it. We'll see what the outcome is. But I feel like this is a natural bookend to the other one, so might as well. And then the other one right below that, who is the person that you don't want to be? Got to talk to David about this in the Focus podcast multiple times, and he's kind of shared that he could be the guy who's good at email, right, and responds really quickly, but he doesn't want to do that. And I always laugh when he uses that definition, but I do like that perspective, like that framing. And I don't think I have one of those for me. I mean, the guy who is good at email, I'm so far disassociated from that persona that that's not even like that does nothing for me. But there's got to be some version of that, that I don't know, I'm kind of a natural people pleaser. I don't want to let people down. So maybe that's the version of this where I'm a little bit closer than I'd like to be to the person that I don't want to be. So I'm going to define that one too and see where we go from there.
Yeah, I can't say that defining what a miserable life looks like is something I want to do. Like, there are things that I'm actively bad at. Like, I'm bad at email, and there are a lot of people that are like, they know Joe's bad at email, so like, don't send him an email. He won't get back to you. It's like, well, I usually see them within decent time. I just don't choose to respond when most people think you should respond because it's not actually necessary in that time frame. And I know that, the support stuff that comes into my email, in most cases, if I give it time, someone's going to figure out how to do it on their own, which is better in the long run for them to learn how. And two, it's got a very high likelihood of resolving itself, just because sometimes computers and things just need time to continue finishing the thing that you clicked and told it to do, and you just got antsy and you just need to wait for 30 seconds. Not jump on your email and tell Joe how it's all falling apart and your computer is terrible and it needs replaced. Like, no, you need to stop having 150 Chrome tabs open at the same time. That's the actual solution. So, like, I know that these things happen. People don't like that I don't respond right away, and thus I get this like image of being bad at email, and people are like, well, you just got to text him if you want something right away. It's like, well, what's his phone number? It's like, I don't know. Like, see, this is why. Like, the people who can text me, I will generally get back to you within decent time, pretty quick. Well, at least with give me some time and I'll get it. That type of message. But I don't want to be good at it. Like, I'm with you on that. But there are other things that I don't know that I'm one that I would say I specifically want to be bad at this. I think I'm with you on that. Like, I don't really have these types of things, but maybe I do. I just am not aware of them.
Mm.
I don't know. It's possible. But I also know that like, trying to decide what are the things I want to be good at and known for, like that's a little more motivating to me than what does a terrible life look like and how do I avoid that? It's not as motivating for me. So I don't really want to do that.
Well, that's fine. He mentions in this chapter that there's two types of freedom. So I do think you need to consider both of these. There's the freedom from, that's the negative stuff we don't want to do anymore. Those last two action items, right? But then there's the freedom to, which is the positive. That's the stuff that you want to do. However, you can't just want to do those things without stopping doing other things. So I feel like these are two sides of the same coin here. And I think I don't know this for sure, but my guess is that you have to consider both of these if you really want to make some change. Now, you don't have to make change necessarily, but he's kind of encouraging us to here in the last chapter. He mentions the pace of change is only going to accelerate. Those on the pathless path are best suited to benefit from it. You got to develop the skill of reinventing yourself. And then he talks about the gift economy. And this is a really cool idea. And this is essentially, we started touching on this in the last chapter. Maybe that was chapter 8, about not just getting the things that you lack, but what can you contribute? So the three guiding principles of the gift economy: find ways to give without expectation of anything in return, be willing to receive gifts in any form and on any timeline, be open to being wrong about all of this, and adjust your approach as necessary. I really like that third one. I think a lot of the books that we've read, all the lists, and, like the three steps, whatever, they kind of have this underlying tone that this is the way. Just follow this, right? Three simple life hacks to save an hour a day every day for the rest of your life. But he's openly admitting that like this is just where I'm at. This is my thinking on this, but I don't know that this is right. That's kind of the, again, the liminal thinking. Be willing to consider how you might be wrong. But I think this gift economy idea has merit. He also mentions that gifts flow toward the greatest need. I think that's kind of freeing. If you embrace this idea, and another way to say this maybe would be give more than you take, be looking to give instead of what you can get from people when you get it, enter into a relationship with them. Going all the way back to that action item where I ranked the people in my life. Do you remember what book that was from, by the way?
No, you and I were talking about it when we were together,
I
and
can't either.
I still have not been able to nail down what it was. Maybe some magic person who's listening to this can figure out what episode that was from.
That was such a good one, though. I refer back to that all the time, and that's really what the gift economy is all about: looking to give instead of to get. He mentions that the goal here is to come alive, not to get ahead. I don't know about you, but when I read that phrase, it was kind of in passing that he said that, I feel, but it really resonated with me. I think my default perspective has been to get ahead. Just because we got 5 kids and thinking about the future, and it's expensive, right? And so, that's just natural, I think, to try to get ahead of things. And, I think maybe that's wrong, or at least it's wrong for me, and I gotta think a little bit differently about things. And then at the very end, he talks about the pathless path challenge and the different steps to go through that. But essentially, we've been talking about different aspects of that throughout the whole discussion here. So,
Yeah, I mean the gift economy is one that it plays right into that help other people concept, right? But the
mhm.
the weird thing about that is it ends up helping yourself just as much as you end up helping them, which is tough to get your head around, I think. I know that like every time I've stepped in and donated either time or money or like skills, like anytime I have done that, it's always been very much a positive to me. So, yes, I have helped the other person or the other group, but at the same time, it's like I come away from that like, yeah, let's go do some more. Like let's get after it. So, I know that it can be very motivating and encouraging even to your own spirit in the process. So, definitely on board with that. I don't know what that means. I do that type of thing quite a bit, it seems like. So, it's one that I don't think I really have an action item around that because it's just I wouldn't say it's a huge part of my lifestyle, but it's definitely there. And I'm glad he called it out because it's not something that I feel like you hear about much.
Agreed. All right. Anything else before we get into action items?
No, sir.
All right. Then to action items we go. I have 3, although they're all really wrapped up in one. And that is to define my rich life. And on the inverse of that, answer the question, what does a miserable life look like? And then who is the person that I don't want to be? So by the time we reconvene, I will know what I want to be when I grow up. What about you?
As says the midlife crisis 40-year-old. Okay, cool. Got it. I only have one, and you might say this is lame, but I think it is very valid knowing my personality. But I need to make sure that I'm committing to your life theme course and not just trying to take the shortcuts out of it, because like that's my tendency is to just do the minimum amount of work, if that, whenever I do those types of courses. So I want to make sure that I'm actually committing to that fully and not just skating through it, just because I feel like there's the overlap between I think what you're doing in that course and what Paul is getting at with this book, I think are very tightly connected. Maybe I'm wrong in that assumption, but I feel like they're very close. So I want to stick with it. I don't know what the result of that is, but I'll try my best.
All right. Style and rating?
Go for it.
All right. Well, I think you're right that there is a lot of overlap between the stuff that is interesting, important, things that I'm passionate about and this book. So I don't think it's a surprise that I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I do think that it's it's a type of book that everyone should read at some point. I know you mentioned that he said things that we've heard before, and I think I agree with you, but he kind of framed him in a way that felt new and fresh. And the end result is that he does a very good job, I feel, of getting people to consider what your life could be like. And I think that's his whole goal from the very beginning is to inspire you to think a little bit differently about the life that you're living and what is your rich life. It's also refreshing because he's not hashtag productivity guy. He doesn't profess to have all the answers. I don't know if you felt the same way, but I felt like he had a very humble tone to everything that he shared here. Almost to the point where like he's sharing something and you're like, dude, you gotta be a little bit more excited about this. This is life-changing stuff here. Some really big ideas, I think, in here and just really well put together. Got quibbles with the quality of the self-published hardcover version, but I'm really glad that I read this. Now, I fully understand that there will be people for which this is not a book worth reading. However, I got done with this one and immediately texted Toby. I was like, "You need to read this. I'm going to require all my kids to read this." Um, maybe there's a better book that kind of speaks to some of these same ideas, but I have yet to find it. I've got a couple others on my list that are probably going to speak to some of these ideas as well. I got inspired reading this one. I want to explore this topic a little bit more. Just the whole idea of like the non-traditional career path. Really, the thing that gets me is, like I said, my kids are growing up, and what do I want to instill in them? I don't want them to follow the traditional path. I feel like at this point, with the world that we live in, that would be doing them a disservice. So I have to figure this stuff out so I can help them figure this stuff out. And if you are coming into it with that curiosity mindset, I feel like this is a phenomenal book. Like I said, there are people for which this is not the right thing. I fully understand that, but I also think that for the right person, this is a life changing book. Um, I am struggling whether to rate this 4.5 or 5 stars. Uh, the justification for the 4.5 rating would be that there is a small subset of people I think that this is not for. However, I do think for the right person, this is right up there with the best of all the things that we have covered. So, with that caveat that it is not for everybody, I think I am going to rate it 5 stars.
Right up at the top. Sorry, I'm not joining you today.
It's all right.
It's how it goes sometimes. He's really driving me nuts with the story. Like it really was. I think if he had taken the approach of like telling like different stories to help with the ideas and then sprinkling some of his throughout it instead of making his the focal point that's carried throughout the whole thing, I think that could have been significantly better. It felt like I was reading a narrated memoir. Like here's what this means. Like here's my story and here's what I learned from it. Here's my story and here's what I learned from it. Here's my story and here's what I learned from it. That's kind of the what I was getting out of it. That cadence kind of drove me a bit bonkers because it's not what I was expecting in that. And the travel thing kind of got me. So between those two, like those were some of the gripes I had with it. The self-publishedness of it. That's a technical term. Not everybody understands that self-publishedness. That's I had zero issues with it. Like I don't want to say flawless, but I didn't find anything that told me that it was poor quality. So I don't know if I just got one later than yours and they fixed it, or you just got a weird one. I don't know. They just don't like you. Maybe that's what it is. It's definitely it. But at all of those qualms said, this is very helpful at the same time. He just nails some things. He has a different voice coming at these topics, the concept of a default path and setting your own journey, being willing to evaluate what that looks like. He doesn't give you a set formula on how that's going to look because he's just trying to help you find the next step, which I very appreciate that he's doing that. So all told, like, yeah, it's a solid book. I would definitely recommend that people read it. I'm not sure what the category of people I would say need to read it. You would probably be better suited at that particular one than me, but I know that this is one that I'm grateful for having read. Just have a few qualms with it. That's all. So all that said, I'll put it at 4.0 just because it's where I feel like it lands.
All right. I figured you were going to put it at 4.0.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's put the Pathless Path on the shelf. What's next?
Yeah, so coming up next, we have the Almanac of Naval Ravikant by Eric Jorgensen. I looked up how to say his name. So this should be a good one. This is one I've seen make the rounds for quite a while. It's very highly rated. People love this, apparently. This is, unlike Jordan B. Peterson, does not seem to have a divisive crowd around it. Sorry, Canadians. But this is one that I think we'll really enjoy, and I'm really looking forward to diving into it. So we'll do that. And then what, Mike?
This one looks great. Next is a recommendation from Carol, and that is The Gap versus the Gain by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. I've talked about this topic. I bring it up all the time, and this is a whole book on a very powerful concept. So I feel the book might be just an extension of the concept, but at the very least, it's going to provide some great discussion. So that will be a fun one, and it'll be something in the Bookworm library that I'm sure I will point people back to for many years.
Cool. How about Gap books, Mike?
I do have a Gap book. I mentioned I read this on the plane. Stephen Pressfield has a new book, Put Your Butt Where Your Heart Wants to Be.
All right, yeah.
And standard Stephen Pressfield, very War of Art-esque. He actually quotes different sections from the War of Art and then adds additional context in this one, but it's a very short read. It's like 140 pages, and a lot of the pages have a couple sentences. You know, it's Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah.
So it's good. It talks about some of the themes from this one in a little bit different way. And again, the whole idea is helping people overcome the resistance. So if you're looking for something that's going to inspire you in your creative journey, that is a good one. What about you? Got any
Cool.
Gap books?
I picked up Tribe of Mentors, Tim Ferriss's book again, and have been kind of working through that. I think I've mentioned, like, that's one I'll have come up from time to time. But it's a solid. It's fun reading some of those profiles.
Yeah, that is a big one.
Yeah, that's I'd
Take you a
have to
year
look
to
it
get
up.
through.
600-700 pages. Like it's a monster. That's not a true Gap book. That's like a reoccurring Gap subscription. Like that's what that is.
That is true. That is true. All right. Well, thank you for listening today. Thank you specifically to the Bookworm Club Pro members who support the show financially. If you would like to become a Bookworm Club Pro member, you can go to bookworm.fm/pro. You get access to the circle community that we spun up, some additional areas in there, including all of the book notes, the MindNode files. I mentioned the MindNode file a couple times in this episode. So I take all those and I put them up in the club as both MindNode files, so they're editable, and also PDFs. And those are all available for for Bookworm Club Pro members. But even if you don't decide to do that, you should go check out the Circle community because there are all of the dates for the live recordings there, so you will never miss a live recording if that is something that you would like to do. You also get access to a couple of additional feeds, by the way, when you support the club and become a pro member. You get the ad free members version, which is the exact same show minus the ads. You also get access to a bootleg feed where Joe and I make fools of ourselves before we actually hit the red buttons. And if I say anything stupid in the episode that Toby cuts out, it's still in the bootleg. That gets thrown right after the
along
episode
with
airs.
along with our coughs and sneezes and any stutters. Yeah.
So if that's appealing to you, you can go check that out. Also, it gets uploaded as soon as we're done here, so
Yeah.
it gets you get the content before everybody else. But yeah, so bookworm.fm/pro if you want to become a member. And thanks to everyone who's done that and has supported the show financially. It really means a lot to both Joe and myself. Helps us keep the lights on. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Absolutely could not do this without you, for sure. So you've been on a long journey with us, and we're very grateful for all of you who do that. And if you are also one of those amazing people who reads along with us, pick up the Almanac of Naval Ravikant by Eric Jorgensen, and we will cover that one with you in a couple weeks.
Alrighty.
Dun, 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 dun. Also, on the bootleg, you get Joe singing, apparently, at the end of the show.
Yep. That's worth the price of admission right there.
It's either that or we just had some unsubscribers right there.
Oh.
Yes, I agree. I'm tired today.
Well, before you go take a nap,
I
let's
can't
pick
take a
a
nap.
new.
If I do anything, I'm going to split wood.
Okay.
Super exciting. I know. It's
Do
exactly
you?
what you wanted.
Should
Okay.
you pick a date?
Yeah. So that'd be the 4th to put us back on schedule, right? Because we're off.
Yes. So not this Thursday, but next Thursday.
1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 1:30,
Let's do 2 o'clock
2 o'clock,
if that works for you.
I suppose.
And then remember to spin up the YouTube event so I can add the
Yeah.
link to the.
I've got a checklist here that I will run when we're done, which has all the bootleg creation stuff that comes along for the ride.
Cool.
Just gotta do it. Let's get Mike Schmitz. All right, there's that. May 4th, 2 p.m. Good to go there. Okay, cool.
Ready.
What else, sir? Before we go do stuff. Before we
That's
say
it.
bye.
That's all I got.
Cool. All right.
Thanks, world.
Thanks, world. Thanks for joining us. Catch y'all next time.